On the night of October 14, 2018, train 417 departed Eastbridge Station at exactly 11:40 p.m. It was an ordinary overnight passenger train carrying 43 passengers and 4 crew members on a route that had operated without incident for nearly 30 years. The trip was expected to take just over 2 hours. By sunrise, train 417 would become the center of one of the strangest transportation mysteries ever investigated. Nothing about its departure stood out. Security cameras showed passengers boarding with suitcases, coffee cups, and backpacks. The conductor completed the final ticket check before the train pulled away exactly on schedule. Weather conditions were ideal, visibility stretched for miles, and railway inspectors had cleared every section of track earlier that afternoon. The first 40 minutes of the journey were completely routine. The engineer checked in with dispatch 3 separate times, reporting normal speed and no mechanical issues. Everything matched the official timeline. Then at 12:23 a.m., train 417 made its final radio transmission. Passing mile marker 82, all systems normal. It was a short, ordinary message that wouldn't have been remembered if it hadn't been the last time anyone ever spoke to the crew. 7 minutes later, dispatch attempted another routine check-in. There was no response. That wasn't immediately alarming. Dead zones occasionally interrupted communication for a few minutes. Dispatch logged the missed call and waited. 5 more minutes passed. Still nothing. Another call was made. Silence. By 12:40 a.m., controllers began trying the train through every available radio channel. No response. Then something even stranger happened. The train's GPS stopped moving. According to the live tracking system, train 417 had come to a complete stop on a remote stretch of track between 2 small towns surrounded by dense forest. Mechanical failures happened from time to time, so emergency crews were dispatched to assist. The first responders reached the reported location less than 20 minutes later. The tracks were empty. No train. No passengers. No wreckage. Not even fresh marks on the rails. The search team walked nearly 2 miles in both directions, expecting to find a derailment around the next bend. Instead, they found perfectly undisturbed tracks disappearing into the darkness. Dispatch assumed the tracking system had malfunctioned. But when technicians checked a backup server located in another city, it showed the exact same thing. Train 417 was supposedly sitting on those tracks. Motionless. Rescue teams searched the area until sunrise. Helicopters scanned the forests. Thermal cameras searched for survivors. Nearby rivers and ravines were inspected. Nothing was found. It was as if an entire passenger train had vanished, without leaving behind a single piece of evidence. News of the disappearance spread quickly, but investigators kept one detail hidden from the public. Even though nobody could find the train, its automatic status beacon continued transmitting every 4 minutes. The message never changed. Train operating normally. The signal continued until 8:11 that morning. Then it stopped forever. Engineers insisted that shouldn't have been possible. The beacon required power from the train itself. If the train had crashed, the system would likely have failed. If it had been destroyed, there would have been no signal at all. Yet for nearly 8 hours after it disappeared, train 417 calmly reported that everything was functioning normally. The investigation only became stranger 3 days later. Railway police began interviewing everyone who had been near the tracks that night. Most witnesses reported nothing unusual. One statement, however, stood out. A freight engineer traveling in the opposite direction claimed he had passed train 417 shortly after midnight. He remembered it clearly because the engineer on the other train had flashed the headlights in the standard greeting used between crews. Investigators immediately rejected the claim. Based on the official schedule, the two trains should never have crossed paths. One of them had to be mistaken. Then they checked a railroad crossing camera. The footage appeared to confirm the engineer's story. At exactly 12:18 a.m., a freight train crossed the intersection. Seconds later, another train passed in the opposite direction. Its number was partially visible on the lead engine. 417. The timestamps were verified. The camera had not malfunctioned. But according to GPS records, train 417 was still more than 30 miles away at that exact moment. It could not have reached the crossing, not even at twice the legal speed. Investigators searched for an explanation. They found none. Then they reviewed cameras farther along the route. That's when they noticed something impossible. At 3 separate railroad crossings, warning lights activated exactly on schedule. Warning lights activated exactly on schedule. The crossing gates lowered. Traffic stopped. The bells rang continuously for nearly 90 seconds. But the cameras recorded empty tracks. No train ever appeared. Cars waited while nothing passed in front of them. When the gates finally lifted, drivers continued on their way, unaware that investigators would later spend months trying to explain what those cameras had captured. Maintenance crews were sent to inspect all 3 crossings. Every sensor was tested repeatedly. Nothing was broken. According to the diagnostic logs, each crossing had activated because a train had physically occupied the tracks. The pressure sensors, axle counters, and track circuits all agreed, yet the cameras recorded nothing at all. Investigators considered the possibility of corrupted footage until another witness came forward. Daniel Harris had spent more than 30 years working for the railway before retiring. On the night train 417 disappeared, he had been fishing beside a small lake less than a mile from the tracks. When he saw the missing train on the news, he contacted investigators immediately. Harris claimed he watched train 417 pass just after midnight. He remembered thinking something felt wrong almost instantly. The train was moving at normal speed, but it was nearly silent. Instead of the familiar roar of steel wheels echoing through the trees, he heard only a low mechanical hum that faded unnaturally fast. Then he noticed the windows. Every passenger car was completely dark. Not dim, dark. He couldn't make out a single person inside. No reading lights. No reflections. Nothing. Investigators assumed poor visibility had affected his memory until they recovered footage from a wildlife monitoring camera mounted deep inside the forest. The camera had been installed to observe deer crossing near the railway. At 12:41 a.m., it captured 6 seconds of blurry video. A passenger train raced across the frame. The image quality was poor, but technicians enhanced it over several weeks. Most of the windows appeared completely black, except one. Near the rear of the train, a single passenger was visible. He wasn't looking forward. He wasn't looking out the side window. He was staring directly into the camera. The frame was enlarged again and again. Investigators compared the man's face to every passenger on the official manifest. No match. Then they checked ticket records. Seat 34C, the seat where the man appeared to be sitting, had never been sold. According to railway records, It had been empty for the entire journey. The image was quietly classified. It was never released to the public. Days later, investigators uncovered another detail they couldn't explain. Several passengers had enabled location sharing on their phones before boarding. Most devices stopped transmitting shortly after the train vanished. One phone didn't. A college student named Emily Carter had forgotten to disable a travel app that automatically uploaded her location every few minutes. For almost 6 hours after the disappearance, her phone continued reporting movement. But it wasn't following any railway. The signal traveled in a perfectly straight line through mountains, rivers, and forests, where no tracks had ever existed. At one point, the reported speed exceeded 280 miles per hour. Then, just before dawn, the signal stopped. The final location wasn't near any town or road. It was in the middle of a protected national forest, where satellite images showed nothing but trees stretching for miles. Search teams spent 3 days combing the area. They found no tracks, no campsite, no damaged vegetation, nothing to suggest that a train or even a single person had ever been there. As the investigation stalled, railway officials requested every recording made by dispatch that night. Most of the radio traffic was routine. Engineers reporting signals, dispatchers confirming schedules. Then technicians discovered a transmission that nobody remembered hearing. The recording had been automatically archived at 1:02 a.m. It lasted just 11 seconds. At first, all they heard was static. After cleaning the audio, a voice slowly became understandable. It was the engineer from train 417. His voice was calm, almost emotionless. He said only one sentence: "We're still on the tracks, but the tracks aren't underneath us anymore." The transmission ended immediately. Dispatch logs showed no one had acknowledged the message. In fact, no operator had even marked it as received. It was as though the recording had been added to the archive after the investigation had already begun. Forensic audio experts confirmed the voice belonged to the engineer. They also confirmed something even stranger. The timestamp embedded within the recording didn't match the dispatch system. According to the file itself, it had been created nearly 14 hours after train 417 had already disappeared. Train 417 had already disappeared.